So basically, I think there's a few things. Unfortunately, because of the way Boris has been acting for the last however long, a lot of it's now been, I don't know what yourself saying, or he's using it to be a world statesman.
Well, he may be. That's probably too cynical to say that. But.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past the man. That's all I'll say. Not at all. But I think that's got to sort of be separated from the actual event that's going, because, yes, we're putting money over there, an awful lot of money, and I think, again, they definitely should have uplifted the universal credit again and other things, but taking Boris out of it, 100%, you've got to keep supporting Ukraine.
Really?
You can't back down to bullies.
What, even if it goes on for 15 years?
It won't. I mean, from just from what you've said, I don't know what the correct word is, but yeah, you obviously, you're not into your military or military history or anything particularly, but I find it ironic that France, Italy and Germany are the voices where the appeasement's coming from. Surely their memories are long enough to know what happens when you appease people, or basically being a country that basically...
Listen, I'd love the world to be like that, and the appeasement and all the rest of it, but I don't think it's the same situation as it was in the 1930s, and we knew then that the Ukraine, by the way, was the breadbasket of Europe when the Russians stole all their grain in the 1930s. That's another point. Thank you very much. That was very, very lively. Now, imagine a radio station where instead of having to say, oh, God, what time's the news? It's past, isn't it? Or 0:00. Oh, it's 22. When am I going to hit? When am I going to hear it? There is a radio station that actually plays the news the whole time. Every single 20 minutes. Oh, yes. It's called LBC News, remarkably. I know, what a moniker. And I shall be on it tomorrow. It's on 24/7. It's called LBC News. You can get it on the smart speaker, etc. And you can hear about it on the Global Player app. I'll be there. Don't forget to listen to LBC and the Global Player whenever you can. Coming up at 10, it's Swarbrick on Sunday, but next with Sunday's Weekend Breakfast, it's Andrew Castle.
Ian, good morning. I'll listen to you while I'm at Wimbledon, day 1 tomorrow. Good morning, everybody. June the 26th, Sunday morning. And this is coming up.
We don't want to be in dispute. We don't want to be on strike. My members here on that Euston picket line are losing their monies, but they're determined that they get a square deal.
That was GMB leader and media superstar Mick Lynch speaking to me yesterday morning about the strikes. It's having a ripple effect in other industries as well, as expected. Barristers prepare to strike tomorrow in an escalating dispute with the government over funding for trials. I wonder if they're right to be striking. We'll find out more. And this...
Socialist policies don't work, and they won't work for a Conservative government just splashing the cash. We can't go on like this. We saw the chairman of the Conservative Party resign after those elections, and he was right to do so.
That was Tory MP Andrew Bridgen, who I'll speak to in just a moment. I wonder, is it time for the Prime Minister to go, or should he crack on, maybe even for a third term, he reckons?
On your radio, on Global Player, and...
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock. Despite 2 heavy by-election defeats, Boris Johnson says he's planning to be Prime Minister into the next decade. He insists he's actively thinking about fighting the next 2 general elections, despite criticism from some MPs within his own party about his leadership. Paul Richards is a former Labour ministerial advisor. He says Boris Johnson must take personal responsibility for the election defeats in Devon and West Yorkshire.
It is true to say governments lose by-elections, but not usually by the kinds of enormous swings we've seen, and not in the circumstances where it is the Prime Minister who's the sort of the centrepiece of people's discontent. Normally it's around a particular policy.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister will put domestic issues to one side as he meets other world leaders at the G7 meeting in Germany later. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is likely to dominate the summit. A spokesman for an American congresswoman says she made a mistake when she was speaking to a crowd on the country's abortion legislation. Standing in front of former President Donald Trump, US Representative Mary Miller of Illinois said the decision was a victory for white life. She apparently meant to say right to life. The ruling to allow individual states whether to ban or restrict abortion has prompted protests, and founder of Chain, an organisation supporting survivors of abuse, Hira Hussein, says the ruling in America could spark similar changes around the world.
There's there's discussions happening and quite intense protests happening in Croatia, in Malta, in Northern Ireland, in other parts of the world. We also know that far-right US-based anti-abortion groups are wielding their influence and money.
Those convicted of causing death by dangerous driving are to face life sentences in prison when new guidelines are introduced in England, Wales and Scotland next week. The new laws also apply to those found guilty of causing death by careless driving for those under the influence of drink and drugs. And Andy Murray says he feels positive about having a good run of games at Wimbledon after recovering from injury. The two-time champion's first match is against Australia's James Duckworth. The weather a dry and bright start for much of the UK this morning, but turning increasingly windy, wetter across large swathes of Northern Ireland, and a high of 21 degrees. From Global's newsroom, I'm Steve Holden.
Hula Hoop's puffed. Sense its lightness, its puffiness. Unleash the delicious taste of Hula-licious. Hula-lightful. Hula Hoop's puffed. Light puffy hoops in a range of delicious flavours and 72 calories per pack. Hula-licious. Hula-lightful.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Andrew Castle.
Very good morning to you. It's 3 minutes past 7. I hope you're very well. Andrew Castle here on LBC, June the 26th. Boris Johnson, we are going to talk about him for the first hour. I'm not going to make 3 hours of it, so don't turn off immediately. Give us a shout. Boris apparently has admitted mistakes, but says voters shouldn't expect a psychological change. He's going to stick around. He started talking about the possibility of a third term now, having just seen his own backbenchers voting, well, his own party, parliamentary party, 40% of them vote against him in the confidence vote. I wonder if that's on the way back. We're seeing a bit sort of the old boosterish Boris once again, and I hated myself, but I sort of allowed myself a smile looking at it and say, "You got to be kidding me!" Now, just tell me, is there some substance there, or is it all just style? I mean, you can't play the Brexit card anymore because kind of voters are not stupid. They know Brexit's sort of done. It may not have been taken advantage of. Some people might want to turn that round. Well, it just feels like that card's been played so much. And when it comes to the vaccination and the efficiency of the rollout, appointing the right people at the right time, all of that, that's sort of been accounted for as well, hasn't it? Because we're done with that as well. Being prepared to give the man credit. So I'm just trying to work out what's on his side, what's in the asset column and what's in the liability column, because when I heard he was standing or thinking about standing for, I just thought, well, is that even a possibility? After the by-elections that we saw in Tiverton and Hunton and in Wakefield as well. Another question we'll ask later on during this programme, probably the next hour, is about Sir Keir Starmer. So we're going to have a look at both sides of the political divide at the moment, and don't discount the Lib Dems as well. But let's bring into the conversation Andrew Bridgen MP, Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire. Hello, Andrew. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. Now you submitted a vote of no confidence, and you're seeking to change these 1922 committee rules as well. So are we going to probably see those rules change? Are you going to be a committee man on there?
Well, that all depends. I mean, there will be nominations open next week for the executive of the 1922 committee. That's the committee that would have the power to change the rules on no confidence in the leadership votes, and the party will vote who goes on the executive. So I guess that whether people minded to change the rules get on the executive or not is a pretty good barometer of whether we've actually now got the 180 votes to remove the Prime Minister.
So presumably you've given up any hope of the man himself, seeing that it's all a bit of a lost cause and he doesn't have public support to the right degree anymore. You've given up on that, have you?
I think Boris Johnson has made it clear that he's not giving up. He's made it clear that he can't and won't change the way he behaves. And I think that's very reasonable. He's the same age as me. and I don't think I'm going to change either. So that was a bit of honesty. I've also more or less given up on the cabinet going to see him, even after Oliver Dowden's resignation, the party chairman, this week. Still no movement from the rest of the cabinet. I would say the next Conservative leader will need to show integrity, courage and leadership, and currently that would have to rule out all of the current cabinet.
Jeremy Hunt's not in that cabinet, and is he the man that you would vote for?
Certainly not. He's a Remainer. He's always going to be a good run-off partner for a Brexiteer, because the membership will never vote for him.
Oh, well, it was 6 years ago. The vote was 6 years ago. Why can't we? Are we ever going to get over what are you, a Remainer or a Leaver? I mean, can we just move on and start running the country?
Well, we're talking about the electorate who will decide when we have the next leadership ballot. The parliamentary party, as always, will get it down to 2 candidates.
That's right.
They go out to the membership of the Conservative Party or associations for the final ballot.
Yeah.
After hustings.
That's right.
And this is
But are we still obsessed with Brexit? Are we still obsessed with whether somebody's a Remainer or a Leaver? Because the public are not to the extent the party is, I would say.
Well, that's the electorate is not the public; it's the membership of the Conservative Party nationally. And
No, but you're supposed to be representing. What I'm saying is, as you well know, I don't mean to be rude, Andrew, but does everything still have to be couched either inside the party voting for a new leader, or outside the party in the real world while we're all trying to get on, as you well know? Does it all have to be one side or the other on Brexit still? Is it still such a big factor within the party?
Yes.
Can you get over that, so we can all move on?
I think when we've secured Brexit and got the full benefits and diverged from the European Union, yes, but there is still a small faction in the Conservative Party who would like to rejoin. We know that, whatever Sir Keir Starmer says, that he and certainly the Liberal Democrats and the SNP would like to rejoin.
Right, okay. So you see that threat still out there. Okay.
That's still an existential threat to Brexit, isn't it?
Andrew, let me ask you this. You've got it's a really weird situation at the moment. We've got a high tax, huge state, authoritarian feel about the United Kingdom at the moment, which is being run by Tories, who you could point the finger at and say,
well, they're certainly not a Conservative government. These are not Conservative policies. And
well, they are official. This is the official. This is we've got a.
Well, I didn't vote for the national insurance increase. I opposed the tax increases.
Right.
I told the chief whip, who was Mark Spencer at the time, a year ago, that socialist policies, if socialist economic policies worked, I'd probably be in the Labour Party. They don't work for socialists anywhere in the world. And I said, what makes you think they're ever going to work for a
change first, Andrew Bridgen? What would you change first? Give me 3 or 4 things that we could hang our hat on if Andrew Bridgen was PM.
Well, I'd cut the national insurance increases back. That's a tax on jobs. I actually coined the phrase "the wrong tax at the wrong time," and the Labour Party picked my tweet up and then repeated. I suppose that's quite.
So national insurance, tax on wages. Yeah, you think that's a tax on wages? What else would you do?
I'd take the corporation tax back down to 19%. When we dropped it from 30 to 19, while I've been in Parliament, every year the tax take went up. It's lunacy to think that we're going to put it up and it's going to go up again. I mean, it's just not going to. That is effectively fiscal self-harm. And everyone in number 10 knows it.
Could you increase the tax threshold so we don't have so much fiscal drag, especially at a time where we might be expecting 11% inflation as well, because they've been frozen.
Well, I think we have got to get inflation under control. And what I do is I take the VAT temporarily off heating, fuel, electricity, and motor fuel.
We're going to need higher taxes, aren't we, to pay for all this?
No, we need to cut waste. We need to get back to being proper Conservatives, where we don't get into the Labour policies of the only way to improve public services is to chuck ever larger amounts of taxpayers' money at it. You actually can deliver efficiency savings, the same as business has to every year, just to stand still. There's lots of new technology out there, and we need new working practices and new technology in the public sector, the same as the private sector has to do every year. And we have to remember that ultimately governments don't have any money, it's all taxpayers' money, and all of that money comes from people being employed and making a profit.
Lastly, what about trust in Boris Johnson? Do you think it can come back? Do you think he can win the electorate and his party over?
No, I don't. I think the Partygate revelations, I said back in January, as they broke, that he should have gone. It would have been the best thing for him, the country, Parliament, and the Conservative Party, but he didn't. And I think having made the rules and broken the rules during COVID, I think we've all got our own sacrifices that we made, the funerals we didn't go to, family events we didn't go to, the things we missed for the national interest. And I don't think enough people are going to forgive the Prime Minister for doing that. And the only other thing is that I hated the fact that they used fear relentlessly to drive compliance up with the loss of huge amounts of
it's a long list of
freedoms. And ultimately, we know that number 10 weren't scared at all, else they would have taken precautions. They didn't.
Good to speak with you. Thank you. That's Andrew Bridgen, MP. Can Boris turn this around? 03456060973, or is trust once lost gone forever? Joe Armitage is lead UK political analyst for the political consultancy company Global Counsel, former advisor to the Government's Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. You'd struggle to get that all on a card. Morning, Joe.
Good morning, hi.
Trust. Can Boris win it back again to the point where he's considering a third term? Do you think we would consider him for a third term?
I think it's difficult to imagine in the current circumstances, certainly with the cost of living issues, the government's inability to seemingly deliver policy particularly well at this moment, general perceptions around competence, and you would include Partygate into that sort of bucket. But I think, in terms of just listening to Andrew Bridgen speaking there, I think with respect to this issue of whether he's going to be deposed and then replaced, it seems like the inability of the Conservative Parliamentary Party to settle on who will replace him, because people like Andrew are talking about how they're not willing to entertain somebody in the current cabinet, so that includes people like Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, and Ben Wallace, Defence Secretary. And I guess a lot of his colleagues in the Conservative Parliamentary Party then think, well, if it's got to be somebody who supported Brexit, who is that going to be? And I think that this inability to settle on who that person is, or at least even name a few people who it's likely to be, means that they're just not comfortable taking a punt on somebody who may well emerge through the process who just would not reflect the views of the electorate.
Apart from the Brexit divide, which I'm quite startled, perhaps I shouldn't be surprised.
I understand it though, to be honest. If you look at, say, the local election result, and even if you look at these by-elections, particularly Wakefield, you can see, so say the local elections, you saw actually the Conservatives gain councillor seats in Hartlepool, in Sunderland, in Amber Valley. The party didn't perform very, very well in those sorts of areas of the country, this red wall, as it's described. But it did much better than people expected, and it does evidence the fact that Johnson is still winning over a lot of those voters who he won over in the general election. People who were lending their votes.
Is that with the assumption, Joe, that true blue kind of Tory heartland will forever just stay? I mean, are they being taken for granted whilst he's winning over the red wall or trying to just maintain?
But I think if you're sitting in a Conservative Party strategist's office and you're presenting to the cabinet and ultimately number 10, you would look at the electoral map of the UK and note very quickly that there are far more seats across the United Kingdom that fall into that sort of red wall bucket, the Heartland, the Hartlepool, Sunderland, Amber Valley, etc., than this other southern bucket, which I think gets a lot of focus in the media, etc., because that's where everyone.
Well, 20,000 Tories didn't show up to vote in Tiverton and Honiton. That's apathy. That doesn't exactly bode well.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of thing happens in that, obviously Amersham was lost. That was before Partygate. North Shropshire was lost. That was before it really kicked off in earnest. So I think the assumption is that by-elections are electorally quite different to a general election. That's certainly the hope of the Conservative Party. And in an election environment, you do have sort of 70 or so % turnout rather than the 50 or so that we saw in these two parties.
Okay. Listen, Joe, thank you very much indeed. Lead UK political analyst for the political consultancy company Global Counsel. Could you even countenance Boris Johnson sticking around for another 7, 8, 10 years? I can't imagine that. 0345 60 60973. What would he have to do to convince you that he was the right man for the job going forward, or is that trust lost? Interested in your views. And coming up, this
is a profession that is constantly being attacked by government in terms of lack of income and working practices, and therefore there comes a time when the criminal barristers say enough is enough.
You won't feel sorry for them, but the barristers are very upset. That was criminal barrister Sailesh Mehta speaking to LBC earlier this week, as these criminal barristers become the latest workers to go on strike, and that's from tomorrow. That will cause a bit of a havoc, and we will find out more in just a moment and after the news. Who's got our news this morning? Simon. Oh, Simon Holden. Steve Holden. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Boris Johnson says he's actively thinking about a third term in office, which would see him in power until the next decade. It comes as he'll use the G7 summit of world leaders to pledge more money to support Ukraine. And drivers who kill are to face tougher sentences from next week. The weather, a dry and bright morning, getting increasingly windy with a high of 21 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Dave Chorner. Following the strikes yesterday, many trains on most operators will start running later than usual today. So the advice is, if you're intending on travelling this morning, to check before you travel, as different operators are running different timetables. Now, looking on the road on the M25 going anti-clockwise, the right-hand Dartford tunnel is closed. It's all because of an accident. Now, the left-hand tunnel still remains open. However, as it's smaller, that will begin to cause queues as traffic gets busier throughout the day. Looking elsewhere in Ilford, there's been another accident. That means that the Cranbrook Road is closed from Park Hotel to Gants Hill roundabout, going in both directions. It's a similar story in South Croydon. The Brighton Road is closed from Bartlett Street to Sanderson Road because of an accident.
This is LBC.
The world is at an imbalance. Technology has turned people into products. It has served us, but it has also harmed us. We believe it doesn't have to be this way. We've created a platform where we hope people feel loved, valued and empowered, and where you are paid every time you watch an ad. This is We Are 8, the people's platform.
T's and C's apply. Redeem through PayPal. Fees charged.
We Are 8. Reclaim your power and get money in your pocket. Download the app today.
Larry photographed stars in the 60s. He saw fame captured from the sidelines. Supermodels staring back at him through his lens. Sessions at the recording studio with the biggest band on earth. Now, Specsavers home visit opticians help him keep everything in focus. Larry is just one of the amazing people we meet on our home visits. Find out if you or a loved one are eligible for a free NHS-funded home eye test by searching Specsavers home visits online.
Got a parcel to send? Do it the easy way with Royal Mail. Go online, buy your postage, save yourself some cash, and arrange for your postie to collect it. Don't worry if you can't print your label. Your helpful postie can bring that for you. They'd love to stay and chat too, but, you know, parcels don't collect themselves. Click, save, we collect. Visit send.royalmail.com. Savings based on online parcel prices compared to over-the-counter prices. Exclusions apply.
Andrew Castle on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
And a very good morning to you. I've got to share this with you. The papers